Ain't no surprise I didn't get these scars from falling over in church. I told some lies, broke some laws and ties instead of good hard work. When I die, I'll take nothing that I took down in the dirt. Lord, I'll cry and I'll be avenged by all those I hurt.
Well, hello everyone again. Thank you for joining me. Today I kind of wanted to go back into the habits stuff and talk a little bit more. I really think that habits is probably one of the most important things that we can do. I guess creating and breaking habits is one of the more important things we can do for overall health. We get ourselves into these little cycles, and really the only way to get out of them is to kind of take control of the subconscious, because that's where the habits are done. And the only way to really do that is to just be way more aware, hyper aware of what you're doing. How do you do that? You know, how do we retrain it? And first off, how does it work? I think one of the biggest issues is that we have just an education problem. We have an education of how things work. Everyone wants to be first, not necessarily right, and expedience is rewarded in our society. It's relevant in just about every aspect of business and just life in general. Like, we are frustrated as a society. I know that it's been a huge step back for us. Megan and I canceled Amazon Prime and stuff because of this, but it's been a huge step back for us that hey, we don't necessarily need things immediately, and the things we need immediately, if they have it at the store, great. If not, then we can wait on it. It's not that important. There's no emergency stuff that we need. And everyone's kind of living in emergency mode right now. So when you're living in emergency mode, it definitely can change the way that you think about things. The day-to-day stuff doesn't seem as important. So this is where the habits kick in, and where your just subconscious routines and the things that your body is doing and your brain is thinking, and the day-to-day functions that you don't even necessarily recognize are happening because your brain is wired to want to do those things a certain way. So how do we stop that? That's kind of where I want to get into today, and not necessarily how do we stop that, but just learning about it so that you understand what steps you can take if you want to interrupt those processes. Before we get to that, we have a note from our sponsors. So, have you ever been so filled with emotions that you're just not sure what to do with them? Sure, you could bury them deep down inside, hit your dog, maybe hit your neighbor's dog. The problem is you could end up in jail. From the makers of therapy, crying. Don't be a slave to your emotions. Cry them out. Powerful word. Great sponsor. Let me tell you, this is, I'll get into it a little bit. I definitely feel like I get teary-eyed more often the older I get. It's like the more that I understand my emotions, the more that they happen. And I'll be listening to a song that I've heard 100 times, but all of a sudden the lyrics just say something different. It makes me think of Teddy, or it makes me think of Megan, and next thing I know, I'm getting a little teary-eyed. I start worrying about stuff, start thinking about things like, oh, that could never happen. It's just anxiety. It's just me thinking about horrible things that could happen that aren't happening. I mean, if you really think about anxiety at the end of the day, that is what it is you are already punishing yourself for behaviors that you haven't even committed or things that haven't even happened. And it sounds dumb, and you can kind of laugh about it when you set it aside, but when you're in that, it really sucks. But all that to say, maybe have a good cry. Maybe you just need a good cry. All right. Before I get into anything, I always like to make sure that I express this thought, and then I'm going to add one thing on it today. So first and foremost, I'm not an expert. I think there are very few experts out there. I think there are a lot of people who have a lot of great information. There are very few experts. And I want to say one thing on top of that. I'm not talking to you most likely. And And that's a bad thing to say in a podcast. But the thing is, I'm not speaking to anyone specific. When I dial in on a specific topic, it's not because I'm talking to one person or a specific person. I'm talking to people who are like me, someone who doesn't just wake up and think that good things are going to happen for them that day, that kind of has a history of making poor decisions and choices, but you're trying to actively interrupt those things. You're trying to make change. For me, it was the way I ate, the way I interacted with others. And those are still things that I need to work on. It was a lot of the ways that I was speaking to myself and the way that I envisioned who I was and the grand reality of the world. And I'm talking to those people who feel like that honestly, that you could do it, but you maybe just don't know how. You don't have enough information. You've tried and you failed because you get to a point where you either don't have the resources or information available to decrease the resource costs to do something. That's really what I want to do. Like, I want everyone to be capable of essentially being their own personal trainer in a way. Like, I went and got licensed. I went and did those things. And I don't necessarily want you to have to do that because I don't think it's necessary for everybody to have to go become a personal trainer. And I don't think it's fair that we hide beneficial information behind a paywall when it's out there for free. A lot of people just don't have the time to go look. Or you say you don't have the time to go look. You have the time to go look. Every time that I am playing a game on my phone, I have time to be reading a book. Every time that I am watching a football game or a UFC fight, I have time to educate myself. It's a matter of choices, and I understand you can't just constantly be doing those things. You're going to burn out if you're not a genius. Like, if you're not one of those Elon Musk-esque people that is just so full of ideas and thoughts that he has to put them in a direction that he's just doing. Like, you're going to have to play the game sometimes. You're going to have to watch a football game to decompress, whatever it is. I'm just saying we have to get better at interrupting that, because Saturday and Sunday and Monday turns into a 3-day bender of football and food for people. And then they got Thursday nights this time of year, and then, going to the high school games on Fridays. Like, we become a very obsessed people during our sports seasons. So we're just talking about making some changes. Also, the flag. This is not some sort of like ploy. I love Mexico. I grew up in Southern California in San Diego. I tell people that I'm from Little TJ or North Tijuana, from Chula Vista, Imperial Beach area. I love it. I was just up in Chicago last week, and that is why this podcast is a week late. I forgot to essentially record it before I went, and I wrote it out. I just forgot to record it before I went, and I was going to edit it while I was up there and put it out for you guys. But it is Mexican Independence Day, and I think we should celebrate. I personally love this flag just in general. Like, it's a flag of a barbarian. Like, it is a manly flag. Don't get me wrong. The stars and stripes are beautiful. I got the stars and stripes right over here. Like, they're right there. So they're the guest background. I don't know, dude. The eagle eating the snake is about as badass as it gets. That's just straight badass. It's warrior stuff. I love it. And dude, some of the best food creations have come out of that area. Some of the best beverages. One thing that people don't understand, real horchata, so much better than that garbage fake horchata stuff they sell up here, or rum chata. Like, that's people's experience with horchata, is rum chata. It's despicable. All right. So we touched on, and if you haven't noticed, I'm taking this serious. I've got notes for these. I'm not just flying off the seat of my pants. The notes are to keep me on track, because while I think everything's up here, it gets a little loose sometimes. I get a little carried away. on a thought, or a thought leads into another thought, and then I got to get back on track here. So really the big thing with why more habits, I want you guys to understand how it all works, what's going on, why it's going on. I want you to understand that it's deeper than just the food choice or the, whatever bad habit, good habit you're trying to instill or get out of your life. Before I really get into this, I know I mentioned a book, The Power of Habit, by Charles Duhigg. And I wanted to go over a story in the first chapter of the book that is, honestly, there's a reason it's in the first chapter of the book, because it's a really cool story to help you understand how habits work in the brain, how just that we really don't have a good firm understanding of what's going on up there. But this gave us a clue. So I have some notes here. I'm going to be kind of reading. I'll try to look up from time to time, but really I just want you guys to take this in and understand. So in the first chapter of this book, there's a story about a guy that we're going to refer to as EP. You can look this guy up. This isn't like a story that is an exclusive story to this book. I had heard this story prior to this book, but the way that he presents the story and interjects the information that we know now versus what they kind of understood then is just really cool versus just reading the story straight. So this guy EP, he got a infection in his brain, and the area that his brain was affected was the hippocampus. That left him without the ability to have much memory longer than just a few minutes. So EP goes in and starts working with a group of researchers in San Diego, and these doctors were just trying to see if anything could be done. So he also, in addition to not being able to really create new memories longer than about 5 minutes, he had lost about 20 years of memories. So just some of you may be pretty young, but for me, that takes me back to 14. So I just think about everything that's gone on in my life right now and just waking up and opening my eyes, and mentally I'm 14 years old. I'm a freshman in high school. And being an adult, like that's like what we're talking about. Yes, he may have been much older, but that's a pretty significant chunk of time. So things started to return to him slightly, but not significantly. Everything was gray at best. Like, he knew who he was. He knew some of his life, but really he was 20 years in the past. So a doctor named Larry Squire and a team of scientists, they had devoted their entire research team to neuroanatomy and memory. So Dr. Squire was kind of reminded of this patient back in the day. So another famous person you can look up, he's going to have his initials HM, and he was suffering from seizures and blackouts. So this patient ended up having a portion of his brain removed in order to resolve the issues, the hippocampus, which at the time they believed was causing the issues. So they cut up top of his skull, and they removed part of the hippocampus, and it began healing up, and HM stopped having these seizures, and his brain was radically changed. So he knew his name, but everything older than about 10 years was gone. So lost 10 years of memories, but his seizures were gone. Now, EP was a little bit different. He could have a conversation. He would seem normal. You're talking to him just like these people. But if that conversation went on longer than 5 minutes, he might struggle with what you guys were talking about to start the conversation or why he was there. But Eugene was blowing the doctor's minds because he was very intelligent, unlike HM. HM was just struggling with a lot of things. A big portion of his brain was removed, the hippocampus. Well, I guess not really a huge portion, just a major portion of his brain. Anyways, so EP, he's being studied by these doctors. They're trying to figure out what to do. They're looking at these old studies. You look at the past to help you interpret the present. Like, that is why we take track of things. That's why we have history. That's why things are important. It's why people need to read information for themselves and learn about what we have already done so that why things may not work now. So going in and cutting out a portion of his hippocampus would have been a bad idea because they've already done studies and they've seen, hey, that didn't really help, even though it helped with seizures. That's not really what our struggle is. So sorry to take the little detour there into educate town, but it's just like headline people. Stop reading just the headlines. Get into the article. Learn a little bit. Learn a little bit deeper about the issue so you understand that, oh, if I just read the headline, like, removal of hippocampus solves man's brain problems. Oh, great. Did you hear if you get your hippocampus removed, it's going to solve all your brain problems? Oh, wow, that's great. I'm going to go get mine removed tomorrow. So, like, if that's how things worked, it would just be stupid. Got to pay attention. Got to read a little bit deeper. Anyways, one day, Eugene's at home with his wife, and Eugene gets out of the house, and his wife is freaking out. She's calling the cops. She can't figure out where he is. She's running around the house looking for Eugene. Anyways, completely unaware that people are like looking for him. Eugene just gets back into the house. He's got sap all over his hands. He's got a bunch of pine cones on the kitchen table. He doesn't know how he left the house. He doesn't know where he went. He doesn't even know what street they live on. Like, when they're asking him how he left and got back, they really had no idea. So they went back to the drawing board, back to old studies, back to studies to look at different things. So they began looking at mice studies because at the time that was a really good thing for us to do. It still is a beneficial thing for us to do. I know that people don't like the animal cruelty thing. And trust me, I struggle with it too. But at the end of the day, it's like, we could test on people. If we think that it's better for us to do it on people, maybe we have to have that conversation as a society. But I don't know. It seems like the mice thing might be the best thing for us to do. We can get into a conversation of consciousness and whether these mice understand what's happening to them or not, but side story. So anyways, they began looking at the stories on the mice, and they determined that a lot of the autonomic processes for the brain in mice were stored in the basal ganglia. Now, humans have a basal ganglia as well. And this process of information storing they referred to in the study, they deemed it chunking. And it's essentially where your brain takes an entire situation and kind of logs it as a reoccurring situation, whether that be opening your eyes, laying in bed, and the way you roll out of bed in the morning. So it kind of chunks all that stuff together. And then the more often that you do the same routine in the morning, it chunks all that information together. But it essentially stores a loop of events as one event. And they were able to determine this by doing different things with the mice. So with the mice, they had this clicking sound, click, click, or whatever it is. And it was followed by a door that would open, and that door would come to the end of a hallway that was shaped like a T. So imagine, close your eyes if you need to. Dude, unless you're driving, keep those eyes open, idiot. Don't listen to me while you're driving. It makes a capital T. So you're at the bottom of the capital T and you're walking towards the top of it where you have a split. And to the left was a reward, and to the right was just an empty hallway. And they noticed that the rat began to search the cage and look through. Now, while the rat's looking through the cage, they can see that the basal ganglia area of the brain is highly activated and collecting massive amounts of data. So they were able to, put some kind of fancy rat hat on and read its brain while it's doing all this. Now, rat hat's telling them basal ganglia is going off. So again, the mice were put through this over and over and over and over and over. Now, what they noticed is that when they began clicking the clicker, the basal ganglia immediately took on and told the mouse, all right, go here. And they would see those same brain patterns over and over again because that chunked information was stored as like a click. Okay, we have a trigger, action, loop, repeat. So your trigger, you act it out, you wake up, you do your morning routine, You end up in the car and you don't even really know how you got there half the time. So for mice, it was that clicking sound followed by the door opening, made to the T, and to the left being the reward, the right the empty hall. And they began to notice that when they heard that, if they took a left turn, they'd get a reward. So memory was never used. The memory centers of the brain were never used in the mice in order to store that information. It was all the habit centers of the brain, the basal ganglia. The click triggered the opening. The mice walked down the hall. They turned left, found the treat. They finished the habit loop and went back to normal. So like they could see the brain patterns, basal ganglia on, they get their treat, boom, it's off, back to normal, baseline behavior. So how is this applicable? Because, dude, we've got the basal ganglia. And the same thing happens to us. Look, before I get into this, we do everything we can to separate ourselves from the fact that we're animals in a way. Like, we wear clothes, we use utensils, we put on hats, we comb our hair, we spray ourselves with perfume, we shower ourselves, we do everything we can to pretend that we're not just like a fucking animal. But we are. And whether you believe that God created us or not, we share characteristics with other animals. And just logically, if you want to reason it out, if we share characteristics with animals, maybe we are a animal as well. We can be a great animal. We can be an apex predator. We can be very intelligent. We can have something that we think is strictly to ourselves, consciousness. But at the same time, we are still an animal. And because we're still an animal, and there's a lot of building blocks that kind of, we'll call it tiers, within the animal hierarchy, like at the end of the day, functionality, like how many different functionalities can an animal perform? And that kind of separates them into categories of whatever it be. Like there are animals like ants that are extremely complex in one category, but at the same time, they're just ants. Like they just exist and they go about their business. And at the end of the day, it's kind of like we exist in a different dimension than them. They are completely unaware of us until we're there, just like something that would be existing in a different dimension. So all that to say, the brain, much like the brain of these mice that has this basal ganglia, would prefer to be operating on that basal ganglia, that autopilot. It wouldn't like to store memories and then have to draw on those memories. It would just like to recognize a trigger and immediately set into a path or a pre-planned out group of routine motions that give it a known reward in a way. So your brain's always trying to form habits. Your brain's always trying to make life easier for you, which is great. Like that is awesome that it's got that. It's the best AI in the whole world. It's thinking and analyzing, just like your phone. Your phone is just trying to mimic your brain. Like, why do you think there is routines on your phone? It's to get you to use your phone a certain amount or more than what you would maybe use typically, or to make your use more efficient. Like for some people, they have poor routines and it makes them use their phones more. If you set your phone up with routines where it sends you like all your alerts in the morning, and then you begin checking those alerts in a certain way and you stop checking one, your phone stops showing you those things. So your brain works the same way. And you have to make a conscious decision to pick up that phone in the morning and go through the routine, or not pick your phone up and do things a little bit different. And the thing is the part of your brain that handles the habits, remember, it's not thinking. There's no memory. There's no morality there. Like it doesn't know if what you're doing is good or bad. It just understands go or no go. So if you have a habit that every time you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands twice or something, I don't know. So maybe that's like an OCD thing. That's a bad one. So let's say it's like at the gym, and every single time you get to the gym, you have a certain routine that you do where it's like you go, you pick your locker, you put your bag away, you put your pre-workout in your drink, you shake it up, you kind of stretch around a little bit. You might do that stuff because you thought it out, but at a certain point, you're just acting out a series of motions that your body understands as a routine. And the only reason it has continued to store that information is because there's some sort of reward. Now, at the end of the day, if that same routine was that when you got home and you locked your car, click, click, and you went inside and grabbed a beer and turned on the TV immediately, that can be a bad routine. But see, they're both offering a reward because at the end of the workout, you're getting dopamine. At the end of the beer, you're getting dopamine. So your brain's not necessarily negotiating with you over a good or a bad routine. You have to do that on the conscious level. And on the subconscious level, it's just understanding that you have determined this is a go or a no-go activity. The more often that your brain recognizes something as go, or you say go, and then there's a reward, the more likely that habit is going to set in. That could mean that habit is a bad thing because it could be something like an addictive substance. And we'll get to that a little bit. But the main thing that you need to understand is how the brain operates on a trigger, routine, and loop functionality when it comes to habit formation. So you have to understand either not to have the trigger around you until you can learn to manage your reaction to the trigger. And we think of trigger as a bad thing because this whole fucking society is triggered by everything. Fucking idiots. Triggered. Yeah. So no, a trigger is essentially just you saying it's something that sets off a series of motions, sets something in motion in a way. It is entropy. So back to Eugene. They're able to test this theory with Eugene by kind of playing the game of elephant. If you've ever played the game of elephant before, it's where you have a bunch of cards face down, and each one has a matching pair, and you flip it over and you take a guess for the next card. And maybe you get it wrong, so you have to keep a little catalog going on in your brain of figuring out where those cards are based on where I picked them previously. Now, at first, you might guess wrong a few times, like you're re-flipping over the wrong card when you think it's there. But the more often you do it, the more you get better with the recognition. It's the same thing like reading a little kid a story. You read a little kid a story over and over again that they eventually understand the story, even if they can't read, and they know what's supposed to be on that page when you're reading them the story. They don't necessarily understand the words, but they understand that on that page, he says something like, octopus have no bones. Like there's this book that I read my son, Teddy, about oceans critters, and it gets to one of the pages, and it's like octopus have 8 legs, they have blue blood, they have 3 hearts, they've got 4,000 brains, they're crazy creatures, and it tells you all these fun facts. But there's one fact on there that I always forget to read because it's in the bottom right hand corner on a separate page by itself, and it just says, did you know octopus have no bones? Well, if I forget to read that, he'll make me go back and say it. He'll go, Dad, but what about their bones? So it's that same idea with remembering where those cards are. It's like you remember that there's something there, even if you don't know what is supposed to be there. You just know, hey, there was words that were supposed to be mentioned. He can't read. He doesn't know that I didn't read all the words, but he knows that there was something supposed to be there. So cards are laid out. That's the trigger. Eugene sees these cards being laid out. His brain is triggered. Now, the routine is when he sees the cards, he would start flipping them over in a certain order, and he was 95% accurate every time after 8 weeks. So after 4 weeks of doing this, he had gotten to 85% accuracy. And after 8, so 4 weeks, 85%, 8 weeks, 95%. Now, he didn't know what he was doing. When they would ask him, they'd be like, so which one are you going to pick? He had no idea. His hands were just moving to the place. Now, the thing is, just like the mice with the little rat hats, they were able to do the same thing, and they're able to see that the memory centers of his brain are not firing. This is 100% basal ganglia. This is subconscious brain taking over. So trigger, sees the cards being laid out on the table. Trigger, I pick up the book about ocean critters and I start flipping through the pages. Routine. We're reading the book interactively. Teddy knows the parts of the page. EP knows what's there. It's not a memory. It's ingrained. It's just there. Now, the loop is that he's rewarded with the congratulations. He's rewarded with the compliments. If you did so good, EP. And the reward for Teddy is that he gets to see the smile on my face or whatever it is. He gets to see that octopus have no bones, and that's important to him for some reason. So it creates a loop in a way. Now, with my son, yes, it is slightly different. And if some expert were to get on here and be like, "No, well, actually, you see, this is different," because it's an example. I have a horrible thing to say, but I'm not going to say it. So this test that they put on EP, while it sounds very like this is testing, this is federally funded testing, flipping over cards, playing elephant, it's like, no, this test proved once and for all that it is possible to learn and make unconscious choices without having any memory tied to it, without any decision making being done. It's a completely learned behavior. And that was a complex learned behavior. We're talking about 52 cards. We're talking about matching cards, 95% right, 52% of the time when they were laid out in a certain order, without any memory. I find this to just be insane, because what this tells me is that it is so much deeper than you think it is to develop true meaningful change. And it takes time, because let me tell you, after 5 years of working on my health, getting injured, derailed everything that I did, and I thought my habits were fucking solid. I thought they were solid. But I'm telling you, it is bigger than that, because at the end of the day, when your brain recognizes a different chemistry going on, it might drop back into a state like a reversion. It's like you have zero control over it, regardless of what you try to do. So you have to learn how to set new habits, because guess what? When you try to reinstill those old habits, it might not work as well. This is why I'm fascinated. And like, for anybody who's listening to this, please stay open-minded for a second. But this is why I'm fascinated about the world of psychedelics, about mushrooms, about psilocybin. These studies are basically showing that it's like putting snow on a mountain. So if you go down a ski slope over and over and over again, it puts ruts in the mountain. If you've ever ridden on a trail, like trail bikes or dirt bikes, or gravel bikes, you know about ruts. And those ruts that get in there force you into a pathway or a position that you may not necessarily want to be in, but you have no choice, because there's a rut, and the rut's going to pull you back into that pre-designed path. And what we're seeing in the world of psychedelics with these mushrooms and psilocybin research, baeocystin and psilocin, all of these. And look, there are other ones. There are other ones that are way more powerful than that. But I'm talking about something very mild. And for those of you who don't know anything about psychedelics, they're not what you think they are. They are not what you think they are. What you have to do to blast off is not what you do. It's not anywhere near what you do to get a fresh coat of powder on the mountain. And what I'm trying to say in all this is that there are some things that I hope come out in the near future regarding the research of psilocybin and people who are struggling with addiction and poor habits, anxiety, things like that, because all of that is going to clear up in time as people have a better understanding on how to use these compounds to lay some fresh snow on the mountain so that you can create either a new rut or so that you can ski in a different place. The thing is, habits are delicate, and there are other studies on mice that give us some kind of the negative side of habits. So another study on mice showed that mice could be trained not to step on electrical floor panels and not eat poisonous food. But if you make the smallest little change to their trigger or routine, they just start doing it again. They just basically kill themselves. So, they put them into a room, and certain areas of the ground have panels that are electrified if they stand on them. Now, so imagine the clicker thing. Or they go into that tea hallway, and one side has poison food and one side has regular food. And the only way they really know is they eat that poison food and they get sick. Now, it doesn't kill them, but when they put them back in there and they eat a little, now they go, and maybe that basal ganglia doesn't have a good remembrance of, or a good pattern loop set yet, and they go eat that poison food again. So now it's going to have that negative reinforcement rather than that positive reinforcement of getting the reward. So like just as much as a positive loop, there can be negative loops. And it's hard because you have to be very aware of yourself of, is this a positive loop or a negative loop? And so fast food places they're kind of designed around triggering this part of your brain. You see them, you smell them, you step inside, they're all the same. It's designed to give you this like sense of familiarity that I've been here, I know this place. And then you eat the French fry and you get that reward, salt, fat, dopamine, and those levels explode. It's like all of those things are triggers: the smell, the look, the feel, McDicks, whatever it is. It's there for the taking. And then as soon as you give yourself that French fry and you get that reward, that dopamine of like, yes, your brain orgasms essentially over the food. It's just making that habit stronger and stronger and stronger. It's not like once the habit's set, it's just like, oh, it's a level 2 and that's it. It's a level 2 habit. No, these things get worse and worse and worse to where habits can become addictions, to where different chemicals and different substances that you put in your body can give you such a rise or have such a pull on the dopaminergic systems of your body that they can create like a habit that is almost instantaneous or an addiction. And then there develop chemical dependencies or dependencies on those substances the more that you introduce those substances, because then you can't get the dopamine without them, or all these other systems are turned on and they've been turned on for so long to keep, to just fight for your health and try to keep you alive because your body's trying to protect you and save you, that if you were to quit introducing that substance, it would kill you, because those systems being turned on without something to fight, they just fight you and they kill you. So you can't let yourself get to that point, which is why you have to understand your triggers. You have to understand your routines. And what you really have to look at is like, if I have a bad habit, let me go back to what is triggering that action. I get the loop. I get that, yeah, I keep doing it. So obviously my brain is finding either something rewarding about it or some negative reinforcement and going the other way. But I have to understand my triggers. And understanding your triggers, I'm not talking about that someone didn't use the correct pronouns, or that, they didn't like your Facebook post or something and you're triggered, or they posted on Facebook and now you're triggered. Like, I'm talking about real triggers, things that matter. I'm talking about the way that you interpret events in your life, specifically, not the lives and events of others. And I think a big part of this is going to help you with moving forward. So if you have a behavior that you are taking part in, that you're not necessarily happy with, you would like some change, pay attention to the events preceding those, and you're not going to necessarily know when it's preceding those until it happens. And then that's when you have to play detective and go back and find the clues. You got to play find the clues. I don't even want to give examples of what these could be. I don't want to give examples of mine, because I don't want you going and looking for an area of your life to find a problem in. I don't want you to go and look for a boogeyman. But if you have a boogeyman, let's fucking go. Let's get this figured out. So this starts for me always by realigning my compass. I just call this setting my new north. you have to be deliberate about setting up your life in a way that promotes your goals. And don't tell me that because circumstances or because your job or because your wife or your kids or this or that you can't. Because at the end of the day, you can. You choose not to because you choose to spend your time other ways. I'm going to say that is true for most people, most Americans. I understand some people are having to work 2 or 3 jobs. I understand that some people do not have time, they feel, to go to the gym. Maybe they don't have the expendable resources to go to the gym. Everyone's got a different excuse for why they're not doing it. I do too. We're always going to be able to find an excuse. We're always going to be able to logic something out in our head if we put enough evidence up against it. But what I'm telling you, the only way to get through this is to attack the problem. You can't be passive about it when it comes to bad habits. Once again, I'm not talking to everybody. You may think you've got a problem because you keep hitting snooze for that extra 15 minutes. And if you just had that extra 15 minutes in the morning, you could do your yoga and you just know you'd be in a better headspace. And yeah, sure. I'm not talking about that. Go figure your stuff out. You're going to get it figured out, dude. You're doing great. I'm talking about the person who is just trying to get out of bed in general in the morning. Maybe. Like, I've been there. And I'm talking about like taking steps. I'm not talking about a complete overhaul overnight because I've done that and it will fuck up your life. It will fuck up the life of everybody who is close to you, your family, your friends. If they live with you, their life is ruined for however long it takes you to get it under control. You've been warned. Baby steps. And, some babies can take steps earlier than others and more steps. But at the end of the day, you can only climb a ladder which you can reach the next rung. So stop trying to climb someone else's ladder. Reinforcement. So a couple different aspects of this. Reinforcing these behaviors is one thing, and I will talk about that. But understanding what type of reinforcement you respond to. So I wore this hat for a specific reason because of this point. There was a time in my life where, like David Goggins, that's whose hat I'm wearing, stay hard, I responded well to negative reinforcement, meaning that it was like, you will do this or negative consequences. You will do this because negative consequences. And that's because in the way that I understood things, that was kind of the way that I was raised. I'm not saying it was wrong, but my parents were preventative in their ideology, meaning like, don't do this or repercussion, rather than don't do this, here's the reward for not doing it. There were times where there was both. But the thing is I, being a stubborn ass of a kid, needed that negative reinforcement because I was always going to push the boundaries. Always. If I did not see that there was a good reason or why or rule to something, the rule was never followed. Why am I following rules that are dumb? That was just kind of how I thought. Now, I don't respond as well to negative reinforcement. There are some areas where it does. Like sometimes I just have to say, get up, you fat piece of shit, and go do something. Like, okay, you're right. Yep. You're being fat. Go. And sometimes it's like, hey, dude, you had a great workout yesterday. Let's see if we can feel that way again today. So sometimes it's encouragement and sometimes it's negative. I'm leaning more towards the positive now. It's just finding ways because for so long, reinforcement for me was negative. I would encourage you that if you are a negative reinforcement person, start working on it now. It's not going to last for you. You will tear yourself apart. You will eat your body alive. You will eat your mind alive, constantly belittling and berating yourself over the things that you haven't done. And it's something that I have to preach to my clients so much because there is a time for get the fuck up and do something. And it's not most of the time. There is a time for get up and go. No excuses. I don't want to hear it mentality. And there is time for, hey, dude, you've been working really hard. why don't we take it a little easy today and go on a walk instead of a run? Why don't we go on a hike outside rather than hit the weights? And give ourselves a reward for working hard while encouraging further rewards by still working. Now, the other side of reinforcement is what I would call immediate reinforcement, or not immediate reinforcement, whether it be like that in the moment, but like future reinforcement, almost like this is something that I personally found beneficial to me. Now, when I was in the peak of like weight loss, behavior change stuff, I was not doing well on money. So I was having to do everything on a budget big time, but I would find ways to do something for myself in the future as a reward for getting there. So a big thing for me was buying something clothing wise that I wanted to wear. And generally I was limited by my size. So if you got to wear a 4X plus, now people are so fat that like they just probably carry 4X everywhere. Since the pandemic, like I'm seeing bigger sizes everywhere, and I'm struggling to find the sizes I need now down there, but couldn't find clothes that I needed. Couldn't find the stuff that I wanted. So I'd have to buy it in a size small, not like literal small, but a size small, generally at least 1 or 2 sizes smaller. And that was like my reward for getting to that next checkpoint was like, hey, when you get there, you get to wear that pair of jeans you got in the closet that are ready for you. It gave me motivation to keep going because every couple weeks I might think, okay, I've lost another 10 pounds. Maybe I'm going to try those jeans on. They're not quite there. Can't get them buttoned yet, or it's too tight to get up all the way. So it's like it created a drive, a reason to get there. For you, it might not be jeans. Maybe that doesn't get you out of bed in the morning. You're going to have to create something that reinforces the behavior that you can drive towards. That's like a future thing that I can't have until. Now, I think that earning things is good. And I think you need to get used to earning things for yourself. I don't think that anything worth having is not worth earning. I don't think free things are generally good things. Nothing. I had this economics teacher in high school that used to teach this principle he called Tonstoffel, and I'm sure a bunch of people have heard it, but there's no such thing as free lunch. Nothing's free. It's costing somebody something, and if it's not costing you something, it's costing somebody else something, because there's no such thing as free. There's nobody who is truly altruistic. They're like 100%. Nothing is truly 100% free. Someone has a cost. So toxic people are going to say things like earning things is toxic. We should just share. I shouldn't have to work hard for that. That's toxic. They're just looking for a quick pill to fix their sad. Their brand is sad. And they're mad that you have found something that motivates you to keep going because they can't be. That's toxic people. I don't want toxic people around you. I don't want toxic people around me. But what I'm saying is get used to earning things. Stop giving yourself everything you want. Earn it. Put it out in front of you and dangle that carrot. This isn't torture. This isn't evil. This is helpful. Because I can guarantee you this. All right, now look, let me give you an example. So earning that clothing size, it's like I was buying something I wanted ahead of time, and I had to lose the weight to get there. It was a reward. I would do this often with like meals. So say my wife and I were planning on going out to like TJ Oyster Bar on Friday night after work. Now, when I eat at TJ Oyster Bar, I want to get ceviche. I want to get aguachile. I want to get some tacos. I want to eat all kinds of food. And I'm probably going to overeat. And they've got all these sauces. I don't want to know how many calories in this sauces. I want to eat chips. I want to have a margarita. I want to enjoy it. It's not something that we would do often. So I would kind of work a little extra during the week, whether that be hitting an extra 10 minutes on the cardio each day or putting in an extra set on every single lift, figuring out what it was each day that it was like I was working extra harder, earning that dinner that was coming up because I wanted it and I didn't want to worry. Now, this isn't like the dodgeball scene where the dude's got the nipple clamps on to the car battery and he's torturing himself over donuts. It's not like I'm holding it out there like, you can't have it, you fat piece of shit. No, I'm talking about rewarding myself for hard work. It's the same thing you want with your job. It's the same thing you want with every other aspect of your life. So why don't you play the game with yourself? You let everyone play it with you. Play it with yourself. Some people are probably not going to remember this, but there was something called layaway growing up. And you would go to the store and they would have a layaway price of like, you have to put this amount of money down. And when you pay off all the money, within 6 months, you get to pick up the item, but we take the item. And you would do this on items that were maybe like a hot item, or maybe you didn't qualify for credit, but you couldn't afford to save up all the money at once. Something inevitably was going to happen, but it's like I could throw $20 at it a week, whatever it is. I did this for like a Razor scooter when I was like 10 years old, just mowing lawns, throwing money on my layaway. But I'm talking about like layaway. I'm talking about like layaway food. Like, I'm going to buy this meal, but I can't have it yet. I can't have it till Friday, but I got to make payments all week to buy that meal in a way. We do these games with every other aspect of our life, but as soon as you say it about food, it becomes toxic and bad because a few people have eating disorders and a few people can't control themselves, so it's bad for everybody. No, that's not true. That's bad advice. Bad advice is general. You should never take bad general advice and like make it your whole personality and fight for it. No, advice should be specific. You shouldn't take advice from everybody. You should take advice from specific people about specific topics. If I was giving you advice on money or how to run a business, you should just give me the finger and say, fuck off. But if I got something to tell you about health, I would encourage you to listen, because I it's not that I'm saying I'm an expert. It's that I'm going to tell you things that other people won't, because they're either getting paid not to, or they aren't aware of it because they're pigeonholed into one topic or whatever it is. I just like to explore. I like to explore all the topics, and I'm going to learn as much as I can, talk to you guys, give you the best that I can. And I really think that the information I'm putting out there is helpful. I hope. Let me know. But anybody who is giving you very general sounding advice to you, not like this, I'm talking to, whether it's 10 people, great. I'm happy to talk to you 10 people, or it's 1,000 people. Great. I'm happy to talk to 1,000 people. I'm not talking to a specific person in those situations, so I have to keep the advice somewhat general, and I can pinpoint certain parts within that advice and give deeper advice on those. But if I then was sitting across the table from you, you would hope to hear something a little bit different than my talking points. My talking points are to pique interest. I want to talk at a deeper level with you. So advice should be specific, and it should come from people who you deem to be knowledgeable or experts, people that you trust, people that you would trade places with potentially in that aspect of their life. Would you trade places with Donald Trump financially? Maybe, but you may not think he's a good person. But financially, you may go, yeah, I'll take, a couple billion. You would take advice from him maybe about your finances, but maybe not on your political leanings. Like, the dude knows a lot about the tax code. Wouldn't you want to learn a lot about the tax code from a guy who's learned how to manipulate it for 50 years? So what I'm saying is, someone can be great for certain things. Someone can be good for certain topics. You're not going to hear me talk about certain things unless I've done research on it. And I'm going to keep my mouth shut on other things. But where I want to push this towards is kind of away from, hey, we've talked about habits, we understand how they work, but I really want to pinpoint in here on something that is a little close to me and close to people that I know, but understanding habits and addictions, how it can be similar. Like I was saying, the mechanisms for habit formation are very similar to the addiction mechanisms. And I want to be careful how I say that, because I'm not necessarily saying this from a what parts of the brain are 100% active, or are firing during those things. But what I'm talking about is the hook or trigger, the action, and then the loop. It's very similar. And being someone that has struggled with addiction, it's like, yo, this whole thing, I just like to have it in my hands. And the problem with having it in my hands is I'm inevitably going to take a hit. And if I have this thing in my hands, I feel comfortable because it's a habit. It's like it's almost like a part of me in a way. And yeah, trust me, I understand what I'm saying right now. I'm not unaware of my dumb. I'm very fucking aware of my dumb. What I'm saying is the habit is harder than the addiction. If I don't have nicotine for about 4 days, chemically, it's gone. It's out of my system. The problem is all of the things that I've done surrounding that chemical addiction. Driving, podcasting, thinking, playing board games with friends, like whatever it is, it has become a part of my life because I've allowed it in at such a young age. Being 14, trying nicotine for the first time and having like an immediate love of it. I would encourage you to stay away from it, especially if you have anyone in your family who has addictive behavior tendencies. Like there was a study, and I don't want to like cite this as something that I fervently believe because this was years ago that I read this, and I'm going to probably butcher it. I'd have to do some research to find the exact study. But I had read a study along the lines where the conclusion of the study was about 30% of people have addictive personalities. There's about 30% of people who could take it or leave it, meaning that if they were to try a substance, they would likely, if they were to try an addictive substance, they could get addicted, but at the same time, they may never get addicted. They may be a casual smoker, a casual drinker their entire life. They may be able to pick it up and put it down, and it's not a big deal. And then there are some people that they can pick it up and put it down all the time. It doesn't matter. They could mainline heroin and they're straight. So I don't necessarily believe that 100%. I don't think that there are certain people that could just like start shooting smack and be fine. But the idea behind it was interesting because what it did show is that there are certain people that regardless of what they do, they're going to have struggles with addiction because the way that their brain has been set up reinforces those type of behaviors very strongly. And they have a high predilection to continuing those behaviors. So you have to understand this is going to be deeply personal to you. You're going to have to be honest with yourself about stuff. But what I can tell you is that having a compulsive behavior towards something is different than being addicted. And this is why I say that not all addictions are bad, because if you have an addiction to going to the gym, and I'm not taught, see, this is why you have to like put all these caveats and stuff, because, one chick goes to the gym all the time and throws up and looks like a rail and she's got an eating disorder, or some guy has body dysmorphia and he's jacked out of his mind and thinks that he's a twig. Like there are extremes on both ends. I'm going to talk to one specific person. I'm going to dial in here for a sec. If you have a compulsive desire to eat healthy food and exercise daily, good for you. If it borders on an addiction that you have to eat healthy food and you have to go to the gym and you have to stay fit, good for you. Like seriously, that's so much better than the guy who goes home and does beer and burger and couch or games for 10 hours a day, who goes to their sit-down desk job on their ass all day and then gets home and sits on their ass all day and goes through this loop over and over and over again, Uber eating, buying Jack's pizzas, stressed to high hell because of their work, and they hate their life. Like, dude, are you telling me that that is better for them than maybe needing to go to the gym so that they can operate and needing to eat healthy food so that they can think good and function well in a society that requires that of them? What I'm saying is if you want to play critic and you want to play toxic critic, especially, and say all these things are bad and draw these distinct black and white lines and very gray things, these are very specific cases. So quit making specific cases the rule. Like that's where people get into trouble with health, is they make someone specific their goal. No. You can have specific goals for yourself, but they have to be in general. Like you can't look at, let's say you're like a high school kid. I'm trying to think of who some famous douchebag is that the high school kids like. Kids like Jake Paul, Logan Paul. All right, Paul brothers. Or I Show Speed or something. So like they see these people and it's like, man, I want to be like that. And they try to emulate those people rather than maybe the character qualities that they like about those people. You don't want to be Speed, but maybe you like that he's outgoing. Maybe you like that he's a little bit wild. So you want to incorporate some of those things into your life. Focus on the bigger picture rather than the minute specific thing. Because that's what I did. I envisioned people and thought like that person's life is enviable when that's the complete wrong idea. It's what are the aspects of that person's life that I find envious and how can I work towards achieving those things in my own life? You don't envy the person, you envy the behavior, but envy not so much in a way that it becomes personable, because that's when it becomes bad. When it's like, I envy that person's life, I want to change places with them. It's like, no, I see that person has worked hard for what they want, and I want that too, and I want to work for it. I want to earn it. Before I finish up here, I guess that's kind of where it's at. Is like you have to learn to walk that fine line of being obsessed and motivated. And in order to really be successful at anything, you almost have to be obsessed. And I don't think that obsession is bad. I think that obsession can be a good thing. I think it can be a powerful motivator and driver of new behavior. I also think it can be a powerful motivator and driver of old behavior. I'd really encourage you guys to start by keeping track of a day. Just keep track of one day and ask yourself, was this an average day? If it wasn't an average day, keep track of another day. And once you have a few days, you can kind of look for some patterns and some routines, and you can figure out where things start to go wrong. And when you can figure out where things start to go wrong, then you can start to interject and make change. All right. So, like I said, I'm sorry this is late. I'm going to try to be better about these. Like I said, I would, in a perfect world, I would like to put out one a week minimum. I would like to do some more interviews. I know I've been kind of talking to a few people about getting some interviews going. And, who knows what those will be about, just talking to people and getting to know other people. But I'll continue on these health topics. I have a few more in mind. Like when I tell you guys that I have a lot of notes written, it's an understatement. We've got a lot of stuff written here. And in all reality, I'd like to talk about a few of these with you. So, yeah. Party on.
How to have a good time, and I'll teach old Jesus how to drink that wine, and I'll show the devil how to have a good time, and I'll teach old Jesus how to drink that wine.